Санбайтгааны хөдөлгөгчтэй. Өнөөдөр ороо манай дефакто институтийн зочноор ноён Costas Christ оролцож байна. Энэ хүн бол National Geographic гэж бид ярьдаг сэтгүүлийн редактор. Аял жуулчлалын, ялангуяа тогтвортой аял жуулчлалын дэлхийн томоохон мэргэжилтнүүдийн нэг юм аа.
Костас Крист аялал жуулчлалын сэдвээр бичдэг олон улсад алдартай нийтлэлч, зохиолч. Түүний нийтлэлүүд New York Times, Boston Globe, International Herald Tribune, Sunday Times зэрэг олон улсын алдартай том сонирхолтой хэвлэгддэг. Крист дэлхийн аялал жуулчлалын зөвлөлийн удирдах зөвлөлийн гишүүн. Дэлхийн 6 твийн 100 гаруй улсад аялсан бөгөөд аялал жуулчлалын салбарт 30 гаруй жил ажилласан туршлагатай.
Good evening.
Good evening to you.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
How many times you visit Mongolia?
This is my second time only.
And the first one was?
2 years ago.
And you are one of the very prominent writers, and you write, in fact, in every issue of National Geographic. You keep traveling a lot, and you have been a very inspirational leader in a sustainable green tourism development. Please tell us about how do you see that type of tourism potential in Mongolia?
Well, as you mentioned, I'm an editor and a columnist with National Geographic Traveler magazine. My column is actually called Tales from the Frontier, and I report on issues of tourism around the world and how tourism is changing, and also tourism's impacts. So one thing we know now, of course, is that tourism is really like fire. Out of control, it can do a lot of damage. But just like fire, if we manage it, if we plan it carefully, we can cook our food and we can stay warm. So the work I do is to make sure that tourism remains an opportunity for protecting cultural and natural heritage and benefiting local people, rather than harming the interests of local people or hurting cultural and natural heritage.
This sounds fantastic. That's we want to be with this fire, and we want to manage it, because as you have seen, Mongolia, to me, it's one of the ideal places to the world to offer that ecotourism. That's at least that's what we understand. And after visiting, you have been traveling around. Do we have that potential? What should we do that?
Mongolia absolutely has the potential to be not only an ecotourism destination, not only to be a sustainable tourism leader, but it could even be a model in the region and also on the global stage. The decisions that Mongolia makes, I believe, in the next 3 to 5 years will determine whether or not tourism is an opportunity for Mongolia in a way that safeguards its cultural and natural heritage and benefits the local people, or a threat to Mongolia's cultural and natural heritage.
Wow.
The decisions the country makes over these next few years will determine, I believe, that future.
What are those decisions we should do in order to have this benefit for everybody?
Well, the world of tourism is changing, and part of my work is traveling around the world and documenting how it's changing. I've been fortunate now to have visited 131 countries. So it's giving me an opportunity to see how tourism has actually developed in many different parts of the planet. The difference between the opportunity and the threat of tourism is sustainable tourism. And sustainable tourism has 3 key foundations, 3 pillars. Environmentally sensitive tourism development, meaning tourism is developed in a way that does the least harm in terms of pollution, in terms of waste, and so on. That's one, environmentally friendly. The second pillar is direct support for cultural and natural heritage. And the third pillar is support for the social and economic well-being of local people. If Mongolia embarks on a sustainable tourism development strategy for its country, then Mongolia will be at the cutting edge of the tourism industry, not only in the context of ensuring that the very things that tourists come to see in Mongolia are protected for generations of Mongolians to be able to make their livelihood from tourism. But also we know today that sustainable tourism is actually more profitable than the old models of tourism, which tended to be mass tourism based on quantity and not quality. So I believe that if Mongolia embraces a sustainable tourism development plan with criteria for how tourism develops in the country according to sustainable tourism, it will succeed.
Have you met any our officials of tourism in this regard?
I've had the wonderful opportunity today to meet with the Minister of Tourism, the current Minister of Tourism, your new one.
Yes.
I was quite impressed, actually. She understands these things, and I believe she's working to try and move this idea forward for sustainable tourism in Mongolia. I also met with the Minister of Environment. Now, why would somebody interested in tourism meet with a Minister of Environment? Because so much of Mongolia's tourism potential is based on its natural heritage.
So you have met two prominent lady ministers of the country. The tourism minister, how is she sharing your view? Is there any concern that we cannot do what you have just now said?
I think from my meeting with the tourism minister today, I was quite impressed. I think she understands these issues. I think she understands the importance of sustainable tourism development. I think she's deeply committed to tourism that will also help to protect cultural and natural heritage and benefit local people, particularly protecting the heritage of pastoralism in this country. The challenges she faces are the challenges that any enlightened government official faces. How do we bring that agenda to life in the country and get the support of other political leaders and the public and the private sector to rally around that vision for sustainable tourism?
And please give us some description of that so that the local Mongolian in the countryside, in particular administrative unit, see that tourism keep going or working.
Well, let me say two things. In Mongolia and in tourism in general, we hear about ecotourism, and now I've just mentioned another term, sustainable tourism.
Yes.
What's the difference? You know,
Right.
what are they, the same thing, this tourism, that tourism? Ecotourism, and I'm one of the original founding members and chairman of the International Ecotourism Society, which first defined ecotourism as responsible travel to natural areas that protects nature and sustains the well-being of local people. That's the definition of ecotourism. Today, ecotourism societies exist all around the world. Now, what's sustainable tourism? Sustainable tourism takes the same ideas of ecotourism, that it should benefit culture, it should benefit heritage of the environment, and it should benefit local people, but it applies it to the entire industry. Because sustainable tourism says, wait a minute, why should just a eco-lodge somewhere out in a rural area or in the countryside be the only one that cares about the environment or cares about cultural heritage? Why shouldn't a hotel in a downtown city? They should also care. What about airlines or in other parts of the world, cruise ships? So sustainable tourism means that the entire tourism industry in all of its manifestations should embrace those three principles.
The whole
I just
value
mentioned to you.
chain of tourism
Yes.
has the same system of care for nature, environment, for everything what they do.
Well, think about it for a moment. Tourism really sells cultural and natural heritage. When we travel, if you ask 10 tourists, 9 of them, or maybe all 10 of them, will tell you, oh, I went to Paris because I love the French culture. I love the French food. I wanted to see the ancient buildings. If they go to Japan, oh, the temples of Kyoto. The story's the same around the world. If they go, to the Caribbean islands, or if they come to Mongolia, what is it? The vast open spaces of Mongolia, the spectacular landscape. So tourism actually sells nature. It sells culture. That's what it trades in. So it's the responsibility of that same industry to protect the very things it sells.
How to enhance those products you have just now described about Mongolia after you have visited some of these places?
Right now, I would say the following. Mongolia is a country of tremendous potential.
Which is not used.
Not fully realized. Mongolia is fortunate because there is one world-recognized company that's Mongolian. This is Nomadic Expeditions, which was recognized twice by National Geographic, the organization that I work for, as being one of the best tour companies in the world, not only because of quality of guides and services, but because of their commitment to what we're talking about right now, sustainable tourism, making sure that the tourism that Nomadic Expeditions operates in Mongolia is supporting cultural and natural heritage.
Any other firm like this?
In Mongolia, not to my knowledge, not that I have seen. I've seen a lot of examples of problems, if you want to know the truth.
Yes, sure.
So on the one hand, Mongolia has this wonderful example that's been recognized. Three Camels Lodge in the Gobi Desert was also recognized by National Geographic as one of the 50 best eco-lodges in the world. So Mongolia has a Mongolian best practice example already in the country.
And don't you see the other gear camps being not eco-lodge?
They're not. Not the ones
why you are...
Well, I visited Lake Huzgol.
Yes.
And on the western shore of the lake,
yes.
there were something like 30 different camps
yes.
up there. And some of them have their sewage going right into the lake. Remember, Mongolia has, Lake Huzgol is 1%, maybe 2% of the world's fresh water
yes.
supply. It's famous as a pristine, beautiful lake.
So the waste goes to the lake?
There is runoff going into the lake. There are examples of tourism that aren't necessarily benefiting the local people as much as it could benefit them. Okay, those are other examples. Also, the environmental footprint in terms of plastic waste and waste recycling is missing.
All around Mongolia now.
So there's some of the things. I saw also some of the examples in Gobi as well, where I think tourism could be done much better. How lodges are designed. For example, do we make sure that Mongolians are the first beneficiaries of a tourism lodge? Are Mongolians hired? Are the local supplies sourced primarily from Mongolia? What you want is it's called greening the supply chain, so that a lodge works with other businesses that are environmentally friendly, and by supporting those businesses and buying those products here in Mongolia, you're creating a green economy as well.
You maybe in terms of food, whatever possible to be supplied by local people.
Yes, because local people who live in or closest to the area that tourists visit should be the ones who benefit the most.
How to make sure that tourism companies are rewarded if they are hiring and employing and taking the service from local people?
This is a great question, because one of the things that is used in countries, and there are a number of countries in the world, many of them now, that embrace sustainable tourism. What they do, for example, governments, is provide incentives. So, for example, if you're trying to attract tourism investment, say, into Mongolia, you want businesses to come and invest in tourism here, well, give preferential treatment to those businesses, incentives to those businesses that will follow the principles of sustainable tourism. Okay? Examples of that might be more tax benefits or lower tax rates for companies that are directly committed to helping build Mongolia's economy based on sustainable tourism. We can have another company that say, oh yeah, I'll come in and I'll build 30 houses on the shore of Lake Huzgol, and I'll make all those houses look like Scandinavian houses. I saw some examples myself when I was there. These are vacation homes. Well, sure, that company can come with money and they can build that. But as a tourist, as a professional writer for tourism, if I want to stay in a Scandinavian house, I'll go to Scandinavia. If I come to Mongolia, I want to have stay in something that reflects Mongolian culture. So, for example, if you have one business coming forward that is saying, oh yes, we're going to build big concrete hotels and condominiums or Scandinavian-style houses on Lake Hosgol, and another company coming and saying, no, we're going to build in traditional Mongolian architecture, we're going to invest in the local community, buy our products, we're going to help the local community start micro-enterprise, small businesses to service our lodge, then the government, in my opinion, should say, that's the kind of company we want. And to attract those companies, we'll give you better incentives. Maybe it's a tax break for the first 5 years, whatever it might be.
Since I know somehow, more or less, these tourism companies, camps, operations, it's very hard to, in this vast country, very hard to monitor in a proper way exactly what is the way of their operation. And cannot be done is by the association of tourism companies itself, something that close, because damage to one name is damage to whole industry. Maybe which is that body which can make efficient monitoring of that operation so that they have incentives?
Well, there's several examples. For example, Mongolia could consider creating a certification program for those tourism facilities that meet the high standards of sustainability. It could partner with internationally recognized organizations that are already doing sustainable tourism certification. So that's one way you can do it. Another way, for example, I know in speaking with the Ministry of Tourism today, they are interested in developing a program that would recognize and grant awards, which could lead to media publicity and other things, to those companies that are practicing the best models of sustainability. And this is something that the new minister is interested in possibly considering for Mongolia. All of these are ways that you create a value to the businesses for doing the right thing.
Well, okay, certainly. And certainly the associations of tourism can be, tourist companies can be involved in that regard.
They can. However, you will find that certification, successful examples of programs that are able to document companies that are doing the right thing as opposed to those who are doing the wrong thing, will have third-party independent evaluations. Some of the work that I do, for example, I have evaluated over 500 different tourism businesses in the last 6 years. Okay? Completely independent. So when I do that, we can't have, for example, in Mongolia, you might not want to have your own tourism body deciding who's good and who's bad.
That's all around, across all industries in the country, the same issue. Have you been visiting Terelj? To east side of the city?
I have not.
Okay, Terelj is, we trying to, it is sort of one of the very picturesque place, mountains, and a lot of companies out there. Every valley has some gear camp. The Mongolians, foreigners all go there. Road is terrible. Service is bad. Just trying to have all this valley. Can the whole locations in the country be sort of incorporated by all these companies, sort of as a corporation?
Sustainability?
For sustainability.
Well, there's something called destination stewardship. In other words, there are destinations. Sometimes it's a region of a country or an area of a country. Sometimes it's the entire country itself that is recognized for their best practices in sustainable tourism. So it is absolutely possible.
The whole country?
Yes.
Also a region. Each region can be as separate and distinguished.
Last year, Western Norway, received a very prestigious award, International Tourism Award, for developing sustainable tourism. Okay, there are many examples of that. The year before, the World Travel and Tourism Council, an organization that I'm chairman of their sustainable tourism program, recognized what was called the Alpine region in 5 different countries, not only one country, but 5 countries collaborating to make sure that the type of tourism that they had, it's called Alpine Pearls, type of tourism they had demonstrated the best practices of sustainability. They were recognized as a destination, and that included pieces of 5 countries. And then there are also single countries that are recognized.
Wow. So either in a group of a country or even a smaller destination in a country can be promoted in that way.
Yes.
I have another question now, with a concern of tourism companies. See, because it has a season.
Yes.
Only for a few months in a year, you cannot invest a lot. And the people are wondering about winter tourism. They hear and there are some tries. Ski is tourism, one-off, right, in winter. Can it be somehow combined? Do you see this country to be a sort of a winter tourism, including alpine ski, if they will make proper resorts all around?
My personal opinion on that would be that Mongolia will not compete internationally as an alpine skiing destination, because there are many other places that are well established and well recognized, and I would question the logic of that. However, I would not question at all the logic of developing a winter tourism season here.
What could be?
Well, for example, winter tourism in the context, you can do a different type of skiing, which is, we call it cross-country.
Yes.
Nordic, that's one way, okay? You can also, for example, there's tourism happening in the Arctic. The area is just as cold as Mongolia. In northern Quebec, the Inuit people, who actually are the only other culture who have throat singing that I'm aware of.
Oh, Inuit,
yes.
The northern Canadian local Aborigines.
That's correct. All the way to the far north, okay, they have a winter tourism season. People come to learn about what life is like in the winter. People come to learn survival skills in the winter. How does a pastoralist family live in the winter in Mongolia?
However, this will not have economies of scale to promote and to work, because I don't think that many people will come here.
It would not we cannot say for sure if it would rival the summer season, probably not. But if it builds the economy in the off-season, even by bringing it up, it doesn't, even if it's not equal July and August.
What else other than this?
You're increasing, what I'm saying, the experience to get out in pristine, isolated, beautiful areas, okay, where local people, in this case pastoralists and others, have survived for centuries, learning from them, learning about the culture in the winter, how they survive, what do they do, what is life like.
When people go, for example, North Americans or Western Europeans go to north of Mongolia and looking for a culture, things that they want to learn, what are they seeking for? It is inspiration, or it is survival, as you said, kids.
What's happening now in the tourism industry is they say authenticity is the new luxury.
Okay. Authenticity, original. Yes.
What it is that the world is becoming increasingly homogenized.
Yes.
People are looking for an opportunity to experience what's real.
Yes.
Authentic culture, sense of place, natural environment, rare endangered species, and so on. People pay a lot of money for this, okay? So in that sense, a destination or a country or a company that can provide them with opportunities to experience authentic culture, that in and of itself, or unspoiled natural environments, or a chance to see beautiful rare birds, perhaps, or to see wildlife in a landscape unbroken by buildings and skyscrapers and stuff like that, people will pay a lot of money for that. And they are paying a lot of money for it.
Well, so possible some products we have described. Then an issue. Well, some country has a wonderful branding of that country. I saw the other day Australia Unlimited, or remember Indonesia or Malaysia, India. What is the logic behind it? Should we do it? What does it take if we do it?
Well, I think you should do it because it's called marketing. I think that Mongolia in the world today has a reputation as one of the world's last unspoiled wildernesses. That reputation is starting to be threatened a bit by unsustainable industry. Mining is a big part of it. I think that it doesn't mean that mining has to go away, but I think it would be very good for this country to develop sustainable tourism, tourism that's committed to conservation, so it sends a signal also out in the world that Mongolia cares about its heritage, it cares about its environment, it cares about its traditions, and that is why Mongolia has embraced sustainable tourism, which incidentally the World Travel and Tourism Council has said sustainable tourism may be the most significant transformation in the history of modern travel. 53 million Americans, just the United States alone, have taken an adventure or active travel trip. This is the fastest growing sector of the tourism industry. So if you have authenticity, if you have unspoiled and beautiful environments, rich cultural heritage, then you have a thriving opportunity to grow your tourism industry. Branding will be part of that. But it would be a terrible mistake for Mongolia to celebrate its pristine wilderness if people came and found out that, in fact, tourism development was destroying the very wilderness they advertise.
In that connection, I have another question, and I believe this is a concern of some people in the country. Because everybody can, it's a free country, you know, take visa and come. And many people come, and there are a large group of people in the country, foreigners coming to the country. They don't stay anyway. They just travel all around Mongolia as cheap as possible. And people say that there is what is the contribution to the economy? They don't go through tour operations. They don't go. They don't stay even in a hotel. They just go, walk, travel, or hiking, and just taking a car on the road, and then you understand the concept.
I understand exactly what you're talking about.
So how to address this issue?
Well, I think that Mongolia needs to address that issue. Mongolia needs to focus on quality, not quantity. Tourism success isn't about how big the numbers are. It's about the quality of the experience and what those tourists take away from Mongolia, tell their friends, their cousins, family that they found so interesting or beautiful. Sustainable tourism, as we talked about, is about ensuring that local people benefit. So in the context right now that Mongolia has an open visa or an open visiting policy, I think that's fine. But I think that Mongolia needs to set its standards higher for tourism to ensure that people are coming, are forced to pay a fair price and a fair wage to locals.
How to do that?
Well, by educating the locals. Let me give you an example. This actually came up in the conversation with your minister today, your Minister of Tourism. The pastoralist people have a strong tradition of hospitality.
Yes.
You know, it's in the heart of Mongolians to open their door and welcome strangers and give them food. But we've had strangers take advantage of that, which I believe is what you're saying. They take this hospitality, but they give nothing in return. The minister actually developed a book that was helping pastoral communities to understand what they should ask for, how much they should charge, and how they should do it. So that when a visitor comes, in the beginning, maybe some of these backpackers were getting things for free, but now some of these families who've had the opportunity to go through training and learning are saying, yes, we welcome you, and this is the price. And they're setting the price to be fair to them, and of course it's good for the visitor.
That's an interesting approach. So this is a part of, we are going through the problems we face since you have been traveling and you are sincerely, you have been writing about Mongolia, and we want to see tourism to be exactly in the way what you have described, and I believe it will be one of the competitive industry in the country. In fact, it is in a certain way because we have so many clusters in Western, Eastern Mongolia, and still there are a lot of things to do. And I want to ask you about the standard for their operation and who is to make it. For example, I want to see if you call it this tourism camp, whatever, and then the restroom, and the shower room, should be certain sizes, certain pressure of the water, and isn't it? How to make it?
Well, first of all, remember that Mongolia, tourism itself is at different levels. So the standards for, let's say, a budget camp or rustic camp will be quite different from the standards of a 5-star or 4-star property, okay? But I think what Mongolia can and should do, and I believe has tried to work on, is creating reasonable standards in order for businesses to be licensed. In other words, don't license a tour business and hope they meet the standard. First, be clear, what have they invested in meeting the standard? What kind of capacity and training have they done for their staff? What will they do to increase quality of services and training? And then give the license. Also, the Ministry of Tourism can provide opportunities for training and capacity building to increase the quality of services that take place in tourism enterprises in the country. That can include guide training, professional guide training, and using a guide training manual, for example.
Who will pay for that?
I think that there are opportunities that can be public-private partnerships. Around the world, there are many good examples of private sector, public sector, and international agencies coming together to provide assistance and financing for that kind of training.
Some 20 years ago, I was in the business, and I was a vice president of National Tourism Corporation at that time, which just that time was being privatized. This company, Jуулчлалын, was trying, prior to that, for only one being only one, trying every year that guides made sure that they know what to talk about. They express it in the right way in different languages. And later on, that company and other companies have tried in this and that way. And we have certainly a group of, I understand, guides who are keep traveling around the tour companies. And some of them are, should they have certain certificate, then by whom? And then should be there a certain standard or ranking them? Do you have similar experience? Probably there are similar problems around the world. How to address that?
Many countries have developed their own guide training schools. South Africa has its own guide training school. Okay, the small Central American country of Belize has national tour guide training, which moves around the country because guides are in different parts of the country. Some might be in the west, some might be in the south, and offers that training. But the licensing sits with the Ministry of Tourism or sometimes with the Tourism Board.
Have you been talking about that licensing system with the new minister?
No, we didn't get into that conversation because we had a relatively short meeting and we covered some of the other things.
But I think that's what is missing. Otherwise, there are players, there are certain capital, and today the tourism industry is quite large.
Let me give you
wealthy.
Here's another, yes, and it should be public-private partnerships. I'll give you an example. The company Nomadic Expeditions, we talked about it before. Nomadic Expeditions has their own guide training manual. This is a manual that each of their guides go through and comprehend. It's a self-taught manual, okay? And then you can also do on top of that a training, in a workshop. But this is a company that created, because as you said, there is no standard for this or licensing, so they created their own guide training based on successful models around the world and then incorporated it specifically to Mongolia.
Now, you see,
it's an example of the private sector addressing an issue where the government or another agency hadn't been able to be effective. So one could say, okay, if there's a guide training program at Nomadic Expeditions, would they be willing to share that or help the country develop a guide training certification?
Certainly, a guide is a part of...
But it should be licensed by the government, either through the ministry or other agency, or the Tourism Association.
Yep, that's very useful hint. You've been to North China, Inner Mongolia, that part?
I haven't been to Inner Mongolia. I very briefly to Inner Mongolia, but I have made five trips to China over the years.
Okay, Kazakhstan?
I was just, not in Kazakhstan proper, but I was just all the way in the border region of Western Mongolia, very close to Kazakhstan.
Okay. So I'm talking about the product confusion.
Okay.
Delusion. whatever you call it, how to address if there is such a thing?
Well, China doesn't market itself as Mongolia, and if you ask most people, most tourists, if you say the name Mongolia, this is what they think about right here, this country. China has got its other attractions that dominate. Kazakhstan is, I would say, not even really an emerging tourism destination. It's not even as far along as Mongolia is in many respects. So I don't think in the global tourism marketplace, when you say Mongolia, nobody confuses it with anywhere else.
You know, another bottleneck is the still several national carrier and the private carrier fly to Mongolia compared with even 10 years ago, much better now. But still, I think this link of packaging of tourism products with Mongolia is a very far place. So combining all this together, how do you see that packaging and what Mongolians can improve in here?
Well, I think my own opinion, having made 2 trips now to Mongolia, is that Mongolia can be its own destination. In other words, and it is already its own destination. In other words, there are tour companies in Mongolia that are selling 10-day and 2-week trips, you know, so that's only to Mongolia. And then they just fly all the way home. One of those trips just ended a few days ago, okay, and I met some of those tourists. And they left and flew to Seoul, Korea, and then to New York. And
tired.
Others, sorry?
Tired, exhausted.
They were thrilled, actually. Not tired and exhausted, because that makes it sound like they weren't happy. They were amazed. They were amazed. I was with this group, and I went to the Golden Eagle Festival. Remember, as I said before, authenticity is the new luxury. These were people who paid a lot of money to go and experience rough conditions in the far west of Mongolia because they were seeing something that was real, you know, that was authentic. That's what's driving the tourism industry right now.
I think whole Mongolia can be that product.
That's right. But here's the catch. You started the conversation by saying, dude, I think Mongolia has this potential to be a great tourism destination or a successful one. I believe Mongolia has the potential to become a leading tourism destination.
Wow.
But I don't believe that's going to happen by looking backwards at how tourism has been done in the past. It's going to be by looking forward
Okay.
in terms of, because the tourism industry has changed.
Will the airlines will help in that?
Absolutely.
They should.
They should. The airlines should be part
including foreign airlines.
Let me give you an example right now. I flew here on Korean Airlines, okay? Korean Airlines is one of the leading airlines in sustainable tourism practices. Their CEO, if you go on the website of Korean Airlines, you will see a letter from the CEO of the company talking about how Korean Airlines is following the principles of sustainability. Now, on the one hand, I would like to say to myself, okay, that's great, because here's an individual who cares about the planet. But the truth is, not only is the CEO of Korean Airlines an individual who cares about the planet, he's an individual who cares about growing his profits for his business. And we know that sustainability pays. So that's just one airline. There are others. So my point is that Mongolia, I believe, needs to embrace sustainable tourism as a destination model. That will catapult Mongolia to the cutting edge of the tourism economy.
What kind of books, literature, and things Mongolian tourism companies should read to know from the world experience to be exactly in the way you describe it?
Well, there's a lot of information now. For example, Stanford University teaches sustainable tourism. Harvard University teaches sustainable tourism. They have a degree in the subject. Okay? So this is the future of tourism. So, you know, for example, you can look at, if you Google sustainable tourism on the web, you'll see much information there. If you look at my website, beyondgreentravel.com, you'll also see resources, links, articles, and so on there. And if you look at National Geographic's website as well.
You know, maybe then your company or National Geographic magazine, maybe you guys can do some sort of annual conference or meetings where you invite all around the world the people to come and to discuss that issue in Mongolia.
You know, your questions are so good, because one of the best things about sustainable tourism development is best practice sharing between countries.
Exactly.
So I think your idea right now is a very good one. What if Mongolia were to host a sustainable tourism meeting that brought leaders from different parts of the world, speakers and experts, to interface together with Mongolians?
Great. And I think this is some idea to take over by our maybe new minister, our tourism association, the active players. Anyway, Costas, the issue we talked, and it's just so great that I had a great, I enjoyed, we and my audience has a great opportunity to listen to the expert, well-known expert, and I hope that this is not your last trip to Mongolia, this is not our last conversation, and vice versa, and hopefully from, say, 10 years from now, Mongolia is a really leading one.
I think it can be. Mongolia has so much to gain and too much to lose if it doesn't make the right decision.
Okay, very good. And you know, back to mining. Mining is not because we love it. Today, only visible alternatives. There's no alternative to mining today. But exactly as you say, we want to mine it. We want this one to be environmentally clean process, but that revenue goes to make sustainable tourism and other couple industries that the product we can sell to the world.
I can tell you that if Mongolia embarks on sustainable tourism as their development strategy, they will develop a tourism economy that your great-grandchildren will still be able to make their livelihood in tourism decades after mining has finished.
This bell is ringing at the right time for this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's my great pleasure.